Hello, St. Mary's. So I am really, really excited because this sermon series that we've been doing on liturgy has really generated some wonderful back and forth. And that's just really exciting to me. I love talking about these ideas, and I'm not the only one who has an idea about the things that we talk about. And so it was really fun that a couple of things landed on my desk this week, and they intersected really well with some stuff that I wasn't able to say on Sunday just because it just wasn't time. So I wanted to take all those things, some things that I didn't say, and some conversations that I've been having this week, and I wanted to keep the conversation going a little bit. If you're with us on Sunday, we said then that the sacraments, which we were talking about, are a physical manifestation of a spiritual reality. That in water, bread, and wine, God's grace is given to us tangibly. This pricked the idea of somebody in our congregation who referenced me back to the book Hunting Magic Eels, which we've been reading, which says, grace comes to us in the material world. And saying, is that what you're kind of talking about? And the answer is, of course, yes, that's exactly what I'm talking about. And this comes to us from our faith. It begins in the person of Christ. That the witness of Christ is that there is no separation between the material and the spiritual in our faith. We profess the Word became flesh and dwelt among us. We profess that Christ was fully God and fully man, fully spiritual and fully material. And so even in the person of Jesus himself, there is no separation between the physical and the material. And we receive the sacraments from Jesus, and the sacraments are core to our faith, and they also witness to this fundamental unity between the physical and the spiritual. Yes, it is all one. But Protestantism has this inherent temptation to separate the physical and the spiritual. And it happens not just because of our theology, but because of what was happening in the world as Protestantism was developing. For example, Martin Luther nailed his 95 Theses to the door of the church at Wittenberg in 1517, right before Europe entered a time of massive philosophical change. First came the scientific revolution, which transformed our understanding of nature and the cosmos. Think back to Galileo and Copernicus as well, and our discovery that the sun and not the earth was at the center of the galaxy. On the heels of the scientific revolution came what we call the Enlightenment. The Enlightenment, rather simplistically, said that reason was the way that we understand the universe and improve the human condition. One of the great authors and philosophers of that time, John Locke, argued that knowledge is gained through experience, not through outside truth. Newton brought that rationality to mathematics. And all of this, now science was delivering knowledge to society, which caused society to ask questions about religion's ability to witness to truth. And as European society embraces science and reason, and Protestantism wants to differentiate from Catholicism and to remain influential in a rapidly changing world, the church also began to embrace rationality and science as a way of knowing. And first of all, let me say, good for us. This is a wonderful thing that the church has shown an ability to think differently over time. But in doing so, it began to encourage a divide between science and religion, one that we still battle today. And one place that we saw this battle was the way that we understood the sacrament. Because rationally, it doesn't make any sense to say this is the body and blood of Christ. And we can't prove it scientifically. And so since we couldn't do that, we started to say, well, it's just a symbol. In other words, science is in the bread, and the religion or faith is in the soul. And in this way, the physical and the material started to drift apart because of the church. And to go back to Hunting Magic Eels, author Richard Beck makes a really great point about this. If you have our copy of it, you can read this on page 122. He writes this: the Protestant temptation to draw a hard line between the spiritual and the material regulates the spiritual to the invisible and unseen. This strict separation facilitates disenchantment as the visible material world comes to be viewed as real and the unseen spiritual world as unreal. That's the temptation when we start making hard distinctions between the spiritual and the material. Protestants live this every single day because we continue to, we have gone along with this to say that the spiritual is not really all that real. It's the material that matters. And so who cares what you believe as long as you do good? But that facilitates disenchantment. But what is interesting now is how science is actually doubling back and starting to affirm what Christians have believed for millennia. Alongside of this conversation that I had with a friend, I also received an article from the Baltimore Sun this weekend, and it was entitled, Emotion of Awe, Critical to Health and Well-Being. That's all spelled A-W-E. Emotion of awe is critical to health and well-being. And the author of this article writes, awe is the feeling of being in the presence of something vast that transcends your understanding of the world. But this was far from like self-help or like a feel-good notion. No, what science is saying is that a larger understanding of the world, one might say a spiritual understanding of the world, that there's something bigger going on in the world than what we can track and what we can quantify, has actual physical benefits. The article talks about how a sense of awe slows our heart rate, relieves digestion, deepens breathing. The author said psychologically, we're starting to be able to show that the practice of awe quiets negative self-talk. It moves us from self-occupation. It actually decreases our narcissism. In a data-driven hard science world which we live in, awe and wonder cultivates a growing bridge between the physical and the spiritual. And is there a better way of practicing these two things than in the sacraments? The sacraments are a critical, important, and ancient way of practicing awe. We say God liberates us and washes us, these huge spiritual ideas in baptism, in the washing by water. We say that in this bread and in this wine, the cross of Jesus Christ is presented to us, the place where we receive salvation. And we say that in the receiving of these things, we say it's no longer I, but Christ who lives within me, in my actual body, in my day-to-day life. In other words, this ancient practice is cutting edge. And so taking the sacraments seriously, believing they are what we say they are, slowing down and receiving them in reverence and in joy is good for us. So says science. And if they are good for us, then here we have something beautiful to offer the world. The world is learning to bring the spiritual and the physical back together. And here in the Christian church, we say we've been doing that for 2,000 years. And so I invite you to consider thinking about the sacraments and the place that they occupy in your spiritual life and in our spiritual life together. I think there's some really healthy conversations to have and some really wonderful ways of thinking about how is it in a world that is looking for a greater sense of awe and wonder, how can we help people reconnect with these ancient practices that do that so very, very beautifully? And so we invite you to keep the stuff coming. Continue to interact with the stuff we're saying on Sunday. Interact with the conversations going around. Send me the stuff that you find. Send me your questions. Email me, text me, contact me, call me. I love keeping these conversations going after church. But thank you so much for your interest in this, and we pray God's blessings on you as you head into your week. Peace and good, y'all.